Hi and welcome to part 5 of the Ultimate Needle Felted Mouse tutorial. So today what we're going to be doing is adding additional bulk to the mouse, and what this is going to do is it's going to really give the mouse some additional features that when we add the body wraps in a few tutorials time, it's going to really bring our mouse to life and make him look super realistic. So it's a really exciting part of the course. I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you so much for sticking with me, and just to remind you, this mouse tutorial was going to be part of a course, so if there's any references to a course in there, just stick with it. It's obviously relating to the course that I was going to sell, but obviously I'm giving this to you for free now. So I really hope you enjoy this part of the tutorial. I'll see you tomorrow with the next part. Until then, happy felting, and I will see you soon. Bye. So now that we've added our first amount of bulk, we're going to add a second amount of bulk to get our mouse looking a bit more mousy. And we're going to concentrate our bulk on the front of the face to get more of a mousy long nose, and also along his hips to integrate his legs more in with the rest of the body and to give him a bit more of a chunky look. So I'm going to take a first piece of Shetland white coral wool again, and I'm just going to measure it. I think it's about 9, it needs to be about 9 inches. And yeah, this is 9 inches by, it should be about 1.5 to 2 inches. Yeah, so there we have it. So it's just over 2 inches. That's absolutely fine. And you know, as I've said before, it doesn't matter if your measurements are a little bit less or a little bit more than I say in these tutorials, as long as they're in that ballpark. So I'm going to fold over about 2 inches of the wool initially, and then I'm going to fold it over 4 times. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. So we've got a nice thick piece of folded wool there. I'm just going to measure that again so you know what we're going to be using. So that's going to be 2 inches in width by about 2.5 inches in length. So I'm just going to now take my mouse and I'm going to fix it to the front of the head, but I'm going to ensure that the bottom of this patch that we're adding is right at the base of the neck. So it's kind of butting up to the start of the mouse's chest. You don't want to have any gaps, because when you come to finish your mouse, it may look a bit odd with a gap under his neck. And I speak from experience here. So always have the wool butting up against the chest area. And then what I'm doing is I'm just using the felting from the inside, working to the outside of the wool, working to the extremities of the piece we've just added, and I'm just felting it in to tack it and secure it. Always being mindful of your fingers, especially when you're using the needle in close proximity to your fingers. And just tack in those last few bits, and this is going to start forming the bulk of the head and the nose. And you don't want to go too mad felting it in. You want to, you know, obviously make sure it's tacked. I'm still using a medium needle here because we don't need to worry about any indentations at the moment, because this is all going to be underneath our mouse. So it's still the medium twisted needles. And I mean, it doesn't matter if you have been using your fine needles, that's absolutely fine, but it just makes life a bit easier for you, and it just felts everything a bit more quickly. So a medium needle is easier over this part of the tutorial. So now I'm taking a second piece of wool, which is about 4 inches in width, and I'm just going to pull it apart relatively as evenly as I can, so you've got 2 pieces that are roughly the same size. This is quite good if you want to get something that's bang on the same length. I'm just going to measure that. So that is 8 inches by roughly just over, yeah, about just under 2 inches. So that the piece that I took originally would be just under 4 inches. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing as I did before with the first piece, but we're going to go for about 1.5 inches in width this time. So I'm folding that end over about 2 inches roughly, and it's 4 turns, so 1, 2, 3 and 4. And then don't worry about this frilly end here, we'll just tuck that underneath. And then what we're going to do is just hold that against the sort of the cheek, so it's running parallel with the mouse's arm, whichever side you decide to work on first. So the arm's in the middle of the piece, and then you're holding that in place and you're tacking it in again as we did with the front piece. And again, making sure that the bottom of the piece butts up to the shoulder area, sort of the bottom of the neck. And then really tuck it in with your needles. And this will start to create kind of, as you tuck in the bottom, sort of the top side will then start to create a more rounded look to the mouse. So you get the kind of the definition between the head and the body. It's not just one big kind of splodge of wool. It's not a necklace mouse. He's kind of, yeah, got a bit more contouring going on. So I'm just getting that tacked in again. I'm going in in about 5mm with my needles. So I'm kind of getting it in there, but I'm not kind of really kind of forcing it in, because we don't want to lose too much of that bulk that we're creating. So there we've got a cheek forming there in the front of the face, and then we're going to go again with the second piece of wool, doing exactly the same thing. So turning the ends over, I'm going for 4 turns. So again, hold it in place. Make sure it's symmetrical with the piece that you've just added on. And I say this because if the arm that you secured it against a moment ago shouldn't be in a different position, but for whatever reason, if it's in a slightly different position and you're concentrating on getting the arm in the middle of the piece, when you come to look at your mouse in a moment, it might be that the other piece isn't quite in alignment with your piece. It's not quite the same, and it might look a bit kind of wonky donkey. So just check that it's symmetrical with the other piece on this occasion. Like I said, it should be that the arm is, and it looks like it is in the right position. I mean, it should be, but sometimes with wool, things can move into funny places. So just check for symmetry, and then you should be okay. And then what we can do is we can kind of manipulate the arms and pull them to make them sort of more symmetrical. So don't worry if the arms aren't quite the same. So that looks good to me. That looks like that's pretty symmetrical. And just also check when you're adding these facial features, like the cheeks where you've got something that needs to be the same as the other side, just give them a bit of a feel and make sure that they feel roughly the same, because when you come to felt them in, you might have one, if you've got one that's not got as much kind of bulk to it, it might sort of have it might not it'll felt in more, so you'll have a wonky sided mouse face. So just check they have the same amount of bulk to them, so that when you felt them, they felt down in the same way. I hope that makes sense. So we're taking another piece now, which is 8 inches, and this one's by 3 inches, so this is much wider, and this is going to be for our mouse nose. So I'm just tearing the bottom, and then I'm sandwiching it on top of each other like we did earlier on with some of the body pieces. So I'm just straightening it out. We want this to be nice and thick, and we're going to kind of do a triangular rotation this time. So we want to hold it nice and firmly in our dominant hand, and I'm just going to fold over that left corner and then fold down the top, about 2 inches of the top. Then I'm folding down about 1 inch of the right corner, and then I'm folding it to the other furthest corner, and then bringing it down. So we're making a triangular shape, holding it in place with your dominant hand, keeping it relatively tight, fold it over again, and we're just concentrating on bringing that round the sides of our triangle. Don't worry if it's not perfect, because we're going to change the shape a little bit anyway, but it just gives us more of a nose shape. We're just going to fold those bottom corners in, that bit of fluff, holding it, and I'm using my nails here to protect my fingers, but you would most certainly use your finger gloves. But I'm just using my nails to protect my fingers so that you can see where I'm felting down. Because this is quite a thick piece and you're tucking in pieces that are quite large, they want to spring up, so you want to hold them down quite firmly. Just tack down those corners. And then, yeah, there's a bit of looseness there, so I'm just felting that in. You want it to be tacked down, but you don't want it to be solid, okay? And then I think that looks pretty good to me. It's still got squidge to it. You want it to have squidge so that you can then shape it once it's on your mouse. So the flat end needs to go to the neck area, and this time it doesn't need to butt up against the chest, so you can have about 5mm gap. You want it to be dead on centre, you want it to be pretty central to your mouse's nose, but sort of more of it towards the bottom of the mouse's face, rather than the top. So as you can see here, so I've probably got a couple of centimetres at the top free still. The top of the head, what we want to do is concentrate on making a face shape where you've got a more rounded kind of third of the face, and then the other quarter is going to be our head, and that is going to be a lot flatter. So I'm just tacking it into place, concentrating on the bottom, because we want this to be nice and felted in so that we can then, when we come to add our head wrap later on, we haven't got any odd bulkiness. So I'm just going to felt that down and get these bits kind of, try and get them as flush as I can with the rest of the face. Make sure there's nothing loose that's going to come undone. To be honest with you, I mean, even if there was, once we get the last piece in, the face wrap, everything gets felted down really nicely anyway. So if you have got any looseness, it's not a terrible thing. So I'm just felting down that top half because I want that to be a bit flatter and create more of a muzzle. But what I'm going to do next is I'm just going to put over some more of the wool, and I'm just going to put that over that edge because I want that to be a bit smoother, so we don't get, as I said before, we don't get any kind of weird lines or anything when we come to put our head wrap on later on. So I'm just going to place that over the frilly ends covering the bottom of the muzzle down towards the neck, and then the sort of the straight ends at the top of the head. And I'm just going to felt that over into place. Doesn't need to be loads of felting, just so that it's kind of tacked in and everything's integrated nicely. So I'm just continuing to felt down, and I'm just concentrating a bit of felting on the top of the head as well. But he looks good now. So we're now going to add the hips to our mouse, or the little thighs if you like. And we're going to do this in the same way that we added the facial bulk a moment ago. So I'm going to take some more white Shetland core wool. And this time we're going to make 2 equal strips that are 8 inches by about 1.5, 2 inches in width. But again, it doesn't matter if you go slightly over or slightly under on those measurements. It's not a problem. And I mean, you're never going to get an exact amount of wool because of the very nature of how it's, made up of so many different fibres. So don't worry if it's slightly over or under. So I'm just going to take my piece and I'm going to fold it over about 1.5 inches for 4 turns again. 2, 3 and 4. And I appear to be knocking the camera at the same time. My enthusiastic wool turning. So I'm just going to take the mouse and I'm going to place this piece, so it needs to go lengthways against sort of in between, so that you've got the foot of the mouse in between the middle of the piece that you're adding. And I'm just going to start off by felting it towards the bottom, because we want to place it so that it's covering the foot all the way up to the exposed pink feet. But you want to sort of felt that piece of wool down over the rest of the foot, and then we're going to felt it around the body as well. All the while we're sort of concentrating on the edges so that we can kind of get a nice smooth join between our wools. And then we're going to go under the arm. And if you've got a bit too much under the arm, just don't be afraid to just pull some away, or even to take your embroidery scissors and just cut some away. But you want it to kind of go directly under the armpit, but you don't want to have so much that it's kind of ruching under itself. So just make sure that it's kind of pretty much there or thereabouts under the armpit and you haven't got any excess. So that's looking quite nice to me. I'm just going to do a bit more felting in a bit, just to kind of get the foot a bit more tight and it's not too loose. And then once that's completed, we're going to do the same thing with the other side. And just to spare you from falling asleep, I've sped this bit up for you because we've already done it. And you guys know the drill now with how we're adding these additional pieces. Holding it with your thumb and forefinger as you're adding it. And sort of you're pulling the width down, so you're keeping it nice and tight as you hold it in place initially. And then checking for symmetry, and I can see that this side's thicker than the other side, so I'm just going to felt that down a bit more. As I keep, oh, he's drunk, he's escaped. Making sure the symmetry is even is very important. Just keep checking that all the while, because like I said, it's impossible to get two pieces of wool exactly the same. A bit more felting. He really wants to escape, this mouse. You're not finished, mate. You haven't got a face. You'll walk into stuff. You'll be a blind mouse with no face. So he's looking good. So what we're going to do next is we are going to add some extra wool to the back of our mouse, because all this side is a bit flat where we've been adding all this additional bulk to his head and his body. So we want to remedy that by putting another panel on the back of his head so that he's got a rounded head as opposed to a sort of a flat head, which would look a bit odd and unnatural. And again, we're going to do this in exactly the same way, a bit of a shorter piece this time. So this is 7 inches and it's probably about 2 inches in width. And it doesn't need to be really thick, this bit, because we don't want it to be really rounded. We don't want to have the contouring like we did with the other piece. So I'm folding about 2 inches over just twice. So it's just enough just to kind of hide those edges that have come. So 2 inches by about 3 inches, that is. Hide those edges that have occurred from adding the other panels. And to give a bit more rounding, but we don't want it to be really rounded, because then it'll look a bit like a cone head. So I'm just going to felt that in, and then felting again, holding that piece to the butt of the back, so at the very end sort of his neck, or the top of his neck I should say, and then felting the sides in, holding it down and sort of holding it in place with my thumb and forefinger, and I'm just felting from the inside out to anchor it in. So I'm just going to speed this up for you now. And as we have been before, we're just going to be going around the head and around the edges of the piece and get it tacked in. So you don't need to go for loads of felting with that piece. And now what I'm doing, I'm just taking some leftover pieces that we've got left over from our mouse, where we've pulled pieces away and things. And I'm just going to get all those pieces of wool going in the same direction. And we want it to be kind of thickish, so probably about 1/2 inch in its thickness, but it's about 4 inches. Yeah, 4 inches by about just over 2.5 inches. And we want it to be a bit wider, this piece. Just adding a bit more there, a bit more bulk, because I don't think you're ready for this jelly that is going on the bum. So I'm folding it over in half, and I'm leaving those ends kind of loose. And then the flat side that we folded is going to go on the bottom of the bum, where you're starting to create that shelf, if you like, sort of the bottom end where it kind of goes inward. So it's underneath the legs. So don't felt it into the legs, felt it above the legs, sort of into where the bum started to be created. And that flat edge is going to start forming more of a bottom shape. Kim Kardashian will be proud of this butt by the time it's felted in. So just going to felt in those edges, and then I'm just going to turn it, and I'm going to pull it tightly with my non-dominant left hand, and then I'm just going to felt that into the side of the mouse. Again, we want to make sure that those pieces that we're felting into the side, they're loose, so they should felt nicely into the rest of the body anyway, but we don't want any kind of ridges when we come to put our first body wrap on. So it's just getting it nice and flush with the rest of the bulk that we've added in. Just get that nicely felted at the bottom. Still using my medium needle. Don't go too crazy with your medium needle in terms of felting this part in, because we want to keep some of that bulk. And what I'm doing here is going from the inside out, and to prevent any kind of sort of air pockets, if you like, I'm just systematically going down the sides from the inside to the extremities and felting it. So I'm just swapping to my to my fine needle now, because this part is quite bulky and I don't want to felt it too much and lose all of that bulk. So I'm just going to go over with the fine needle and get it felted in, but not really firmly. And that way we can get a much more even felt as well on the bottom. Because it's a lighter touch, so it's kind of a much more gradual process. So it takes a bit longer, but you just get a bit more of an even finish. So yeah, check for symmetry. And then as we progress and we add the body wrap, we're going to be pushing the sort of the waist in and the chest area in. And there's a lot of looseness here, so I'm just felting that in a bit more. And then you can also sort of concentrate between the legs as well, where the tail is. Get that nice and tightly felted in. I'm just going to concentrate around this bottom area. And you can see where there's unevenness, where I need to just sort of get that tacked in a bit more. And what I'm starting to do now is using my fingers to push the mouse in where I want him to be felted in. And this is a good way of forming shape with your mouse, because sometimes you'll do something and if you felt it in place too quickly and it looks wrong, you're a bit stuck. Whereas if you use your fingers to press it in sort of to a rough, the rough dimensions that you're looking for, the rough shape you're looking for, it kind of gives you an idea of whether that's going to work. And then you just kind of felt that into place whilst it's kind of pressed down. And then you just keep doing that because it'll kind of obviously loosen off as you let go. But it just helps you to create a more natural shape. And I'm just going around the bottom again, sort of pressing all the while. So I'm just going back round the bum again, making sure it looks even. I can see the left side looks a bit bigger than the right, so I'm just going to felt that down a bit more to get it nice and even using my fine needle still until it looks roughly the same as the other side. That looks good to me. I'm happy with that. So we're now going to move on to the next stage, which is adding our body wrap.